this is Dr. Jeremiah Stevens, and in this video I was going to talk about the US Biotek 96 food IgG panel, which we run a lot in our office. I've talked to my rep and he said I've run several hundreds over the years, and I've just seen this test to be really useful as a way to identify potential food triggers, foods that are potentially causing problems. Especially I've found this test to be useful in children. It's nice because it just requires a little finger stick. It doesn't require a full blood draw like a lot of other allergy testing does. And just the results are often really correlated with symptom picture. And so if we can identify a food, take it out of the diet for a period of time, oftentimes we'll see some real benefits in kids' behaviors and their physical symptoms, just across the board. So that's something that's been really useful. But I've used it with adults just as much as kids, and it's something that I think, if it didn't cost anything, I would run on every single patient that walked in the door. I just find it to be that useful. There's a fee to it, so to cover the lab fees. So it is not something I do for everybody, but I encourage it very regularly, and I run probably several a week in my office. So something to really strongly consider if you suspect there are maybe some foods that you're eating that are causing you some difficulties. So there's basically three main ways to identify a food allergen. And this test is the one I use the most, although I have used all the other ones at times too. So basically, I'll just briefly go through the three ways. So the first way is sort of the old way, which is something called an elimination diet. And so that's essentially cutting foods out of your diet, watching what happens, and then putting foods back in and watching what happens. So it requires a little bit of vigilance, a little bit of determination, and a little, but the nice thing about it is it doesn't cost anything, so it can be done. There's basically two types. There's like a real specified elimination. If you suspect a food is going on, like say wheat or dairy or something else, you could just do a trial of cutting it out for 4 weeks. And I usually like to give it at least 4 weeks just to see what happens, and then put that food back in and see what happens at that point. So that would be kind of one option to do if there's something you're strongly suspecting. If you have no idea, the full elimination diet is basically another option, and that's essentially where you go on a real hypoallergenic type diet. So you basically kind of go on a meat, non-fruits except for citrus fruits, because citrus fruits can be allergenic. So basically meat, non-citrus fruits, vegetables. Sometimes I'll cut nightshades out off of that, like tomatoes and potatoes and peppers, if we're suspecting those. And then basically a lot of rice. Quinoa is pretty low allergenic. I haven't seen a lot of stuff there. So basically, yeah, it's kind of, you live on meat, rice, fruits, and veggies for a period of about 4 weeks, and then you slowly challenge each food back in. I usually challenge a food and then wait 72 hours before I challenge the next food for any delayed reactions. So that's one opportunity, one option essentially for identifying food allergens. Number two option is to go to an allergist and get the skin prick or scratch testing. And I've seen that to be really useful, especially for environmental allergens, dust, pollen, dogs, cats, things like that. I haven't seen strong correlation always with foods. There can be, but a lot of times I've seen, that people come in and bring their reports. It doesn't show anything in the food department. We run this US Biotek test, and then all of a sudden we find allergens. So then the first is elimination diet, which can be done. Second is scratch testing. Number three would be some sort of blood test for antibody levels. And there's two main ones that we work with. The one that most conventional medical doctors will run, or allergists will run, is an IgE antibody test. So IgE antibodies are the antibodies mostly associated with anaphylactic type reactions. You eat a peanut, your throat closes up, you get hives and things like that really quick. That's usually mediated by IgE. So if someone is having anaphylactic type reactions, I will often run those IgE tests. However, most of the subtle ongoing chronic allergy issues, runny nose, diarrhea, constipation, digestive problems, behavioral issues, skin problems, anything like that, usually aren't these immediate reaction anaphylactic type things. They're more chronic, delayed reactions. And in my experience, IgG testing tends to be the best way for that. And so that's what we run the most in our office, is this test by US Biotek. It has a little finger stick. We can look at 96 different foods, and it rates everything on a class of 0 to 6 antibody levels. So we get sort of a range of how a food is doing. So that's something that's interesting to look at. You can see some of these sample reports. We've got one linked to on our website from the company, and I'm going to talk about some of the different ways that you can interpret these lab tests. So that's something that can be a little bit challenging sometimes to figure out, but generally what we do is that once you get this report back, we try to cut out foods that are showing reactivity for a period, again, of 4 to 6 weeks. So essentially we still need to do that elimination diet. We can just be much more targeted on our eliminations. We don't have to eliminate everything allergenic. We just eliminate these potential, the foods that are showing up as trigger foods on here. And so this test has been useful. I think it's really helpful. I would really encourage you to run it on yourself or your children if you're suspecting that there may be some foods that are going. Like I mentioned before, I've had a lot of people come in with scratch tests, IgG blood tests from their doctors. It showed no foods at all. We run this test, all of a sudden 2, 3 things pop up, we pull them out, and people notice significant benefits. I'd say if this test has a limitation, it tends to over-report allergens. Sometimes it'll show things that aren't true allergens. So usually I like to do that elimination diet and then try to put the foods back in after about 4 weeks, because sometimes you can tolerate it. Often what happens is there's 1 or 2 more primary allergens, and that is creating inflammation in the digestive tract that then will cause other ones to follow. So if we can cut out the primary allergens, often these other secondary ones are able to stay in the diet. But it all becomes on the person. Everyone's an individual. There's no hard and set rules on the human body, so we can really have to individualize this. But once we get those results, it helps us making individualized decisions, coming up with a diet strategy for the next 4 weeks, and then challenging these foods one at a time. Okay, I'm going to show you how to collect the sample for the food allergy test for US Biotek. So what you'll receive in the mail will be in a priority envelope like this. It has a prepaid return stamp on it to send back to the company. So when you collect your sample, you're just going to put everything back in this priority prepaid mailer and send it to them. And so what it's going to include, we'll have a requisition form here, which is you'll need to fill out a couple things on here. The main thing you need to fill out is this patient box here, which just has your personal information, address, and do it in the name of the patient because it has to match what's on the sample exactly. So if you're doing it for a child or for someone else in your family, make sure you put down their information. It should be marked bill physician because you prepaid us, and then the lab will charge our card when you do that. And we're going to be running this IgG panel, so that should be marked down here. The only other thing you'll need to fill out is up here, the date collected, the time you collected, and the date you sent it, which you should just be the same day or the next day, the day you package it up, and just mark room temperature because you don't need to refrigerate or freeze this kind of a sample with just these dry blood samples. So you'll need to put that into the kit, then back into the envelope. So then the other things you'll need to collect the sample, everything is included in here. So there's 2 of these lancets, auto lancets for pricking your finger to collect the sample. They send 2 Band-Aids, 2 alcohol swabs. So usually we can get by with just 1. Every now and then you don't get enough blood, so you'll need to do 2. They do have a gauze pad for wiping the area. And then this is actually the sample collection card. So you'll need to put your name, date of birth, and date of collection on here. And again, this has to exactly match what was on the requisition form here. If they don't match, the lab will reject them. So make sure you put exactly the same spelling, everything like that. There is 12 circles inside. They really only need 6, it says. Let's see, actually for the IgG general food, it's only 4 circles really needed. I usually try to fill them all up though, because I've had sometimes if the circles aren't all the way filled, they don't consider that a full circle. So I would do as many as you can get out of the sample. If you're bleeding well, I'd probably just do them all. That way, if we wanted to add some things on later, there's a possibility we could do that as well too. Then there is this silver envelope, which is what you put the sample in. Inside the silver envelope is 2 things, a little silica pillow desiccated thing to absorb moisture, and then this little moisture card to indicate humidity levels. So once you dry your sample, you want to air dry it completely. I'll put these back inside here. You want to air dry it completely for at least probably an hour on the circles till they're all the way dry, and then you're going to put it in the envelope once it's completely dry. Seal this up, and then put it inside the envelope with the requisition form, and everything else you can throw away. There also is some instructions here which will tell you exactly how to do this whole process too, so you'll have that in front of you as well if you want a written version to go over, but I'll show you how to do it here in this video too. And then there also is a set of gloves. So these are pretty large. They make them universal size, so they're a little bit big for people with smaller hands. So sometimes it's better to use your own. You can find some smaller size gloves at any sort of drugstore. I don't really like these ones just because they are so big.
It kind of makes you don't have very good sensation. If you had really large hands, they would work well. So I'm going to show you how to collect the sample. It's easier if you can get someone else to do it for you, but if you're unable to, it's definitely something you can do yourself. So I'm just going to demonstrate on myself here. So what you're going to need here is these things. You'll need the card. You'll need the alcohol swabs. So I usually kind of pinch this card so it'll stand up like this. And you're going to need the lancet, the alcohol swabs, a band-aid just for the end, and this gauze pad. So I usually would open this up. So usually you probably want to wear gloves if you're doing it to someone else. If you're just doing it yourself, I don't think it's that big of a deal because it's only your own blood. It doesn't matter too much. So you want to use your non-dominant hand. So I'm right-handed, so I'm going to use my left hand. You want to do either your middle or your ring fingers. And you want to be just a little bit off to the side. So I find that's the easiest place to do. So what you're going to do, first thing I would recommend doing, especially if you have really cold hands, is to run your hand under as hot of water as you can handle. So go to the sink, hold it under hot water for about a minute to get a lot of warm blood into your hands, especially if you're cold-blooded, cold extremity. If you're not, you don't necessarily have to do that. But you're going to open the alcohol swab, wipe the finger really well, and then you want to make sure you let it dry because it'll sting if you don't. You want to have the gauze pad because they recommend wiping away the first drop of blood that comes out. So these auto lancets, basically, the needle is hidden inside. So when you twist this, this is sort of the safety seal. So the needle is inside there, and it gets automatically released when you press it against the skin here. So what I usually do, I try to get a lot of blood kind of pulled down towards the tip of the finger and hold it there. And then you're just going to come along the side here and just press it down, and that makes a little blood spot. So you're going to wipe away that first spot of blood, like I said, and then you're going to kind of just squeeze down, get the blood flowing, and fill it in that circle. A lot of times you just have to kind of do this over and over, and like that. Essentially, it's just kind of painting by numbers. So it's a little bit weird to do to yourself. If you can have someone else do it for you, I think it's a little easier, but it definitely can be done by yourself, as you can see here. You want to try to fill in the circles really thoroughly, and then that's what we're going to send. Some people are much better bleeders than others. Some people it just starts gushing. Other people you kind of have to work at it, so it just depends. So fill in as many circles as you can. I'd probably at least do 6 of them, but if you can do them all, it's probably for the best. So that's kind of the process. So again, it doesn't really hurt. It's a little weird. I have seen a couple people get lightheaded when they see their own blood, so it can happen. So if you're one of those people, if you have a tendency to, or if just if you start feeling lightheaded, make sure you can lay down somewhere, get your feet elevated, and it usually will pass in a few minutes. So I've had one person pass out on me over the years, so it can happen. It's not too bad. So again, you're just kind of trying to fill in these circles. So there's 6. You kind of get the gist what you need to do there, and then you're gonna cover. Use the gauze pad, kind of hold it there for a second, and then you can put a band-aid on it. So that's really the process. And then again, make sure your name, date of birth, date of collection is on there. Set this up like this. Just let it fully air dry for a good hour or so before you put it in there. It'll turn kind of a darker maroonish color. So that's essentially the process. It's really easy. It's pretty safe. You're not going to hurt yourself. These lancets just basically just shoot the needle out and then they retract back in, so you don't have to worry about poking yourself a second time on that. So that's the process. Send it in, and then once we get the results, we can go over all that. All right, thanks for watching.
Okay, I'm going to go through here and just talk briefly through a couple reports. I've got the sample report from the US Biotek website, which is this they show, and then I've got 2 patients of mine that I've covered up, redacted their personal information, just so you can show you a little bit how I interpret this and what the next steps would be. You always can make an appointment to talk with me or another naturopathic doctor, go over these results, and we can help you determine what the best course of action is. But if you want to just do this yourself and come up with a diet based on what we see, this will give you some information on how I think about this and how to use this information. Okay, so the first one I have here is the sample report. It's from the US Biotek website, and this one, if you notice in the top right hand corner, they basically have 3 different antibodies. So this is actually a test of all 3, IgA, IgG, and IgE. I do not run this usually with all 3. I don't run IgA testing that much. I just have found it not to be that much different usually than IgG if we're doing both. And so I find IgG to be more useful. So IgE I will run on some occasions, basically if someone's having anaphylactic reactions. It does require a full blood draw, so it's not something that would be easily done through a self-administered kit, but if that is something you wanted to do, you could set up an appointment to talk with me. We could find a way to get you the test kit to take to a lab that can draw it and process it for you. So if you've had some anaphylactic type reactions, breathing difficulties, hives, immediate reactions, that could be something we look into. But generally what I do is I run just the IgG component, but you can see a little bit what the test looks like. So on the first page, we've got basically dairy, meat, miscellaneous fruits and fish. And so you can see at the bottom here, there's a class here of reactions. So it basically goes from 0 being no reaction all the way up to 6, extremely high antibody levels. So on this first page, on the sample report, we can look at the fruits. Really not too much going on there. There's a little bit showing up on cranberry. That may be something worth kind of trying to pull back for a little bit of time and see. My suspicion is that's not a huge allergen based on, we're seeing these other ones on the other left side of the page in the 5s and 6s. So things down in the 1s, if we have those really high numbers, are often more secondary allergens. They're just because there's so much inflammation in the system from the bigger primary ones. So, but it might be worth cutting that out, especially and see what happens, and then challenging. The fish and shellfish down in the bottom right corner, nothing showing up there. Nothing too significant down in the miscellaneous category. The meat category, this person, they did have a little bit of an IgE response to beef, that's a pretty unusual response. But someone may be having some issues with that. But really not too much reactions on the beef, chicken, lamb, pork, or turkey. But we do see eggs really off the chart here. And they do separate out chicken egg whites, chicken egg yolks, and duck whole eggs. Some people can tolerate duck eggs when they can't tolerate chicken eggs. So I've seen that sometimes where the chicken's up but duck is way down. And that would be a scenario where you could. But in this person, I definitely would want to cut eggs out for the next 4 to 6 weeks and just see what happens, especially with reaction class 6. That's a really strong reaction. And then we see in the dairy family too, we see pretty good reactions across the board. The biggest one being for whey, which is one of the 2 main proteins found in dairy, casein being the other one. Less reaction on casein up above, but still I think I would cut out all dairy, and even goat milk still showing reactivity up to 3. So again, for the next 4 to 6 weeks, I would do no dairy on this person if they came into my office. Second page here, you can see there's some reaction across the board on the gluten grains. So barley, wheat gluten, wheat gliadin, oat, rye, spelt, and whole wheat down at the bottom. So this is a pretty strong kind of gluten reaction, I would say, on this. And so when I see this, I would definitely want to cut out the gluten grains for a period of 4 to 6 weeks. And so this person kind of has the big 3. The top 2 allergens I see coming in on this report would be dairy and gluten, and then the next tier down would be eggs, soy, citrus probably be the next tier down. So, but this person has 3 of the big ones: so eggs, dairy, and gluten. So for this person, I would definitely recommend cutting out all of those 3 things at a minimum for the next 4 to 6 weeks. You can see on the vegetable side a little bit of mushroom and tomato. It may be worth cutting those out as well, again, if you're going to do kind of this 4 to 6 week period. But you can make a diet on the other things that are showing up on this. I mean, it's a little bit challenging, obviously, for someone to go from eating a standard American diet to a diet like this. But definitely you could do, beef, chicken, the meats would all be fine, fish should be fine, fruits are all fine, all the vegetables are fine. Nuts and seeds, nothing really showing up there. Beans, nothing showing up there. Rice, it's under here under white rice, nothing really showing up there. Peanuts, peas. So definitely you can make a diet out of that for 4 to 6 weeks, and then at that point we do challenging foods. And when I challenge food, I like people to eat it 3 times in a day. So breakfast, lunch, and dinner. If we're doing milk, we'd challenge that, have it breakfast, lunch, and dinner. If you have a reaction right after the first serving, obviously you don't need to do the other ones because you're going to react to it. But if you have no reaction, I'd do all 3 servings and then wait for 72 hours for any delayed responses. And it can be anything. Well, just pay attention. Mood shifts, skin changes, sleep changes, digestion changes. Anything that can kind of pop up would give you indication that there is some issue going on. So with this person, I would definitely cut out wheat, gluten, and dairy, or gluten, dairy, and eggs, and which wheat is part of the gluten family, and then possibly mushroom, tomato, and cranberry as well. But the big 3 for sure I would do, and the other ones I would probably try. I'd encourage them to avoid those 2, and then challenge all these foods back on the back end to see what can tolerate and what cannot. Okay, sample report number 2. This came from a patient, and you can see here the front page. And again, this is just looking at the IgG, which is what I typically run, and that's what we offer through this website, our testing protocol. So this person again has the dairy family pretty high, especially whey showing up here, and milk, whole milk and whey. So definitely that would be something to cut out. Eggs, we're seeing the same pattern again here. Duck eggs being a little less so, but still there. We're seeing a little bit of banana and clams, so those are kind of not as typical common things, but I have seen those pop up. So those I would pull out for a while. And then page 2, really nothing. Maybe just a slight bit on mushrooms. Let me make a note here actually. When I see this here, when you see on the front page, we have baker's yeast and sugar cane, and then on the second page we see mushrooms a little bit up. Usually that makes me think when I see that, and I'll see that come up a lot, you may see that show up on your report, that makes me think that you're having some candida yeast overgrowth issues in your system, because the yeast is showing up, and mushrooms is another fungal element. So if you see those coming up, that often indicates that there is some issues with yeast and fungus. So maybe doing a candida type cleanse, and again, talk to one of the naturopathic doctors here about that. If you're interested in doing that or looking at some protocols for candida. So this person, I would probably recommend them do that. I'd have them cut out the eggs and dairy, and probably bananas and clams for the next kind of 4 to 6 weeks again, and then re-challenge those foods kind of. And while you're doing the elimination, I would probably recommend doing some candida cleanse type things as well. So pay attention to that. If you see that pop up, that would be something there. A lot of times, the best reports I get are with nothing, but the second best reports would be nothing except for one thing up, and that's the easiest. We can just pull it out. Often what we see is most people, it's in the 2 to 3, 4 range of different kind of things that are showing up. So just be aware. But the last one I report here, I'll show you, is this is one I see occasionally, and probably in 11 years I've seen maybe 5 reports like this. And if this shows up like this, I would encourage you really to reach out to a naturopathic doctor to talk about what to do. So this is a report where we see almost everything showing up reacting, but not everything, but mostly close to everything. So this one is an IgG and an IgE. This person was having some kind of breathing difficulties that were somewhat like anaphylaxis. So we did run that, and the nuts came up in the black. You'll see cashew nut, peanut, and pistachio. And the patient confirmed that one of their episodes happened after eating pistachios. So yeah, I definitely think that there's an issue with peanuts and tree nuts on this person for that. But you can see the IgG just almost across the board. Everything is almost showing up on here. And when I see that happen, my thought is that the digestive tract is really compromised. That there's, we get into something called leaky gut syndrome, that the barrier between the digestive tract and the bloodstream is really compromised. And so in this person, we want to put them on a really aggressive digestive repair protocol. And again, you can't cut everything out because you have to eat something. So it's a little bit tricky in these scenarios, and it's not something I would necessarily recommend you dealing with this on your own, but you can. But I usually in these cases will ignore things that from like 0, 1, and 2, and possibly 3 classes, and try to build a diet as much as possible on those lower reactors, and then really cut out the big reactors. And this person, like dairy for sure, is off the charts. Let's see, and just the higher reactors, try to cut those out. This is an unusual report. I really don't think you'll see a report like this, but I just wanted to put it out here in case you do. That is an indication that there's just a lot of digestive compromise, and we need to do kind of a real intensive digestive repair protocol to kind of get the system back, so it's not reacting to every food that you take on. So most of the time, like I said, what we see 1 to 4 things popping up, and that makes we can eliminate those. We do it for 4 to 6 weeks, and then we challenge it. But every now and then we'll see a report that comes back looking like this, and that means that there are some real compromises. So I just wanted to put that out there. Feel free to reach out to us, talk to us. If you have questions on your report, we can set up a time to go over it with you, specify a treatment plan, some diet approaches. If we suspect there's some yeast stuff, talk about that. If we suspect there's some significant digestive compromise, talk about what we can do about that. So thanks for watching. I hope you're having a great day, and look forward to helping you with all your healthcare needs.